Should Star Wars be rebooted? Now, that word can have a couple different meanings, but there is one Hollywood director who thinks that Star Wars should be rebooted and started over. And that director is Matthew Vaughn, the same guy who directed Kick-Ass, worked on X-Men films, and The Kingsman. Well, I say, Matthew Vaughn, stay the hell away from Star Wars. And as I said, reboot can have a couple different meanings, meaning remake or just start a new type in the franchise. But what Matthew Vaughn is talking about is starting over with Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Chewbacca. And he had this to say. When asked whether it would be tough to turn down a Star Wars movie at this stage in his career, he responded, "No, not so much. For me, doing a Star Wars movie is to play with the characters I love. If they said to me they'd reboot Star Wars and actually have Luke Skywalker, Solo, and Vader and do your version of it, everyone would say you're an idiot to try, but that would excite me." Now, he isn't talking about rebooting the franchise with a new storyline of different characters and all that stuff. He's talking about remaking the entire saga and not just the sequel trilogy. He's talking about the original trilogy, the prequels, and the sequels, redoing all of it. Why? I don't know. Maybe he's a megalomaniac or something. But this disturbs me that there are Hollywood directors and producers out there who have this mindset that Star Wars needs to be restarted with new people playing the characters and new stories of those characters. I'm sorry, but no. No. Screw that. No, don't do it. Don't touch it. No, the Star Wars series is not perfect. There are plot holes all throughout the franchise. Well, franchise, company, whatever you want to call it. There are plot holes everywhere, and there's little you can do about it. And why? Because that's part of the nuance of Star Wars. And what's more disturbing is that there are fans out there saying, yeah, do it. Let's see what you come up with. Sorry, no, don't. So what Matthew Vaughn is saying to me is that he doesn't respect George Lucas and what George Lucas had created and started with his own money. Mostly his own money. Okay, he continued it with his own money. But he's saying that he doesn't respect it, he doesn't like it, and he thinks it needs to be fixed, quote unquote. And he must have some kind of cojones to think he's going to do it better than George Lucas. Well, let me remind you guys of something. Remember a little movie called Planet of the Apes? Remember how Tim Burton thought he could make it better than the original? Well, yeah, let's see how that turned out. That movie sucked. I love Tim Burton and everything, but man, that movie was horrible. I could barely watch it, and by the end of it, I was like, okay, let's delete this from my memory archives. And what about the many retellings of The Wizard of Oz? Sucked. All of them. I can't think of one that was as memorable as the original. Yes, The Wizard of Oz was before its time, but it also had special effects that didn't hold up to today's standards, but nobody touches it. Nobody wants to go back and redo it. Same with Gone with the Wind. You don't do it. Now, am I comparing Star Wars with Gone with the Wind or The Wizard of Oz? Yeah, hell yeah, I am. Why? Because it pushed boundaries. It did things that nobody else did at the time. The same with those other movies. Star Wars pushed the boundaries of technology. There was technology created just for Star Wars by George Lucas and his people at ILM. He made it. He made it all. And now this guy, Matthew Vaughn, this asshat, wants to turn around and say, well, we can use technology that we have now to remake Star Wars. I'm sorry, but that wasn't what Star Wars was created on. It was created on pushing those boundaries and creating new special effects to make this realistic story of a space fantasy. Now, what I talked about before about reboot having a couple meanings aside from remake, and I'll get into that in just a minute. I usually don't talk about this kind of behind the scenes stuff because, what does it help? But this one is dangerous, and I felt like I needed to speak out about it. Is anybody listening? I don't know, but I have to get my frustrations out. This dude needs to shut the hell up, stay away from Star Wars, and Kathleen Kennedy, you better not hire him to reboot the Star Wars series or you're dead to me. When Monsignor Vaughn was asked about comparing the franchise to James Bond, he said, "Why are these Star Wars characters so hallowed that from 1977 you can't redo it for a new audience?" Do it for a new audience. That's silly. If he even touches one sideburn from an original Imperial officer, I'm going to be pissed. And this is just showing that his ego is bigger than what his grandeur actually is. How many movies has he made that have become classics? Yet he's wanting to touch a classic movie and change it to his style, making it less memorable than it already is. And how many of these movies that he's made have been his own original ideas? Kick-Ass? X-Men? Kingsman? No, not his ideas. So he's going to take somebody else's idea and say he can do it better. Really? Dude? So how many directors are actually being asked if they would reboot a Star Wars movie? Well, here's one. There's one. So that can't be the only one. So now that he's ramped up this volume saying that, oh, I'd love to reboot Star Wars, then how many other directors are going to be asked the same thing? What's next? Tim Burton? We're going to have Danny Elfman doing the soundtrack? Now, Tim Burton does have some amazing original ideas, and I love his original movies, but he needs to stop remaking stuff. Not that he's ever said he wanted to remake Star Wars. I don't think he'd even be interested in that. I mean, can you imagine the giant head, tiny feet, clay sculptures, or stop motion of Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Han Solo, Chewbacca, R2-D2, and so on and so forth? Nah, he's not going to touch it. Now, look, here's my message to Matthew Vaughn, if he ever hears this, which I doubt he will. You want to make something as iconic as Star Wars and make it better than the original Star Wars? Come up with your own screenplay for something outside of the Star Wars universe. Come up with your own science fantasy. Write it, direct it, and so on. And do it yourself. And let's see how that turns out. Quit using other people's ideas and thinking you're going to make them better. Now let's talk about the other side of reboot, which means just coming up with new stories in the same universe, but not involving the characters that have already been established. Well, hasn't that been done already? The Mandalorian, the High Republic stuff, the Bad Batch. Yeah. So he's not talking about that there anyway. He's talking about redoing all of what has been done before. Now, I heard a popular YouTuber in the Star Wars community talking about how he'd be down for this. Well, no. You misunderstand, because you said you'd be down for it if he didn't touch Luke Skywalker and maybe some legacy characters, but he absolutely said he wants to touch the Skywalkers. Wait, I don't know if he meant it that way. I don't know. I'm keeping it in there. Whatever. But no, my conclusion is do not touch Star Wars. Do not remake it. Do not change it. Personally, I think Mark Hamill's kind of an asshat himself, but I love Luke Skywalker, and I love what he did with him, and I love how much he knows about the character and the insights he has. Now, to take Mark Hamill, Peter Mayhew, Harrison Ford, or Carrie Fisher away from the Star Wars franchise and recast them with someone in your image, dude, no. Basically, you're saying you don't respect what the actors did before, what the directors did before, and what the writers and editors and everybody did before. You think you're better than them. Stop it. If you want to go back and remake a classic film, then remake Casablanca. Let's see how that turns out for you. If you do a well enough job, then maybe, just maybe, I'll give my thumbs up to you creating a Star Wars story that does not involve Skywalkers, Solos, Princess Leia's, or any of that. Now, I may be down for you doing something with the Old Republic. That hasn't been done in live action yet, so feel free. But stay away from the original films. Stay away from what's already been created. And I've gone on too long about this. I'm sorry, guys. It just burned my blood when I saw that interview and I saw videos talking about it and people agreeing with him about it. I don't get it. Why are you agreeing with this guy? It doesn't need to be done. don't do it. And I'm going to say that's my piece. If you guys have any comments about this, please let me know down below. Until the next video, this is Gerald, a Star Wars fanatic, signing off, wishing you all great health, happiness, and peace. Thank you all for watching, and remember, this is the way. And positivity in the Star Wars community can be the only way.